Pierwsze słowo to było cygojny, szwajny, cygojny. Te dwa słowa. To pamiętam i z tymi słowami ja umrę.
We were not, my relationship with them and them with me was not a touchy-feely relationship. It was a good relationship, but, and they sacrificed a lot for me. It was a coal mining family. My foster father was under manager of Tinsley Rock College in Sheffield. Not a wealthy family, but their commitment to me, I think they must have I went to a grammar school. First of all, to the sort of preschool department, or the pre-secondary, when I was, in the years, I would say 9 to 11. I think they must have paid for me to go to that school. After I failed my 11 plus, my English I think wasn't good enough fully to understand the questions of the 11 plus. They paid for me to go to the local grammar school. I mean, their commitment to me was absolute. Well, when we got to Liverpool Street Station, I mean, there were either about 300 kids in a big hall with English people moving around amongst us. We had no common language, we couldn't converse, and they were just moving around amongst us. We had our names written around, labelled around our necks, and they were looking for the child or children they had offered to adopt or to foster, and there was nothing, sort of no legalities. They just found the name of the child or children they'd go into foster, signed a bit of paper and took us out. My first memories of London outside Liverpool Station, this is when, again, there was a burst of newness, double-decker buses and trams. I'd never seen double-decker before, and so I loved making model cars and things out of tricks, but I'd never seen anything like a double-decker. They was beyond my imagining and new, and totally scary, because how could a thing as tall as that not turn over? That is a very clear memory, just being, I think that's the first time I really felt fear. And then catching a train to Sheffield, being taken into their house, and there it was a typical 1920s semi-detached with a nice coal fire in the fireman grate. It was the middle of July, but that was the only way of heating water, so there was a big coal fire and in an open fireplace. Something I'd never seen before. On the continent, we only had closed combustion stoves. And I thought the house was burning down. Had to be totally reassured. And then bedtime, that's your bed. These layers, sheets, blankets. And I really didn't know which layer to get into, because I'd only ever had a duvet before. So amidst all the three abiding memories and all the troubles, the three abiding memories are double-decker buses, open fireplace, and sheets and blankets. It just sounds, you couldn't make it up. And my foster parents, they were lovely people, but pretty strict, and they were determined that I would learn English quickly. So my brother wasn't allowed to translate anything I said or anything they wanted to say to me. So if I asked for Kartoffeln, I went hungry, until I asked for potatoes. And if I asked for Erdbeer, I went hungry until I asked for strawberries. I liked my food, so I learnt English in 9 weeks. I came on the 1st of July 1939. I went to an English school, probably something like the 3rd of September 1939. I don't remember having a language problem. I fitted in. And I say my foster parents wanted me to acclimatize very quickly. And so they were lovely, but they were very strict. And they were very strict in other ways. I bonded with their son John, also John. I was called Henry in those days, but I bonded with their son John very quickly. I bonded with him more easily and naturally than I actually bonded with my brother. He was just 7 months older than me. My brother was 3 years older than me. And then my brother was actually, after the first few weeks, in a different foster home about 2 or 3 miles away. We kept in contact, but we weren't close. But my foster parents, although they were lovely, they made it, everything was on the table. They said to me, we are not going to treat you like we treat our own son. We are going to treat you differently. We are not your parents. And we want you to realize that, if you, by then I realized, this was a bit for the long haul. They said to me, if your parents survive the present troubles, we don't want you to be in the position of knowing who your parents are. And that was very wise, because since then I've met other Kindertransport children who had bonded with their foster parents and over the war years had totally forgotten about their natural parents. And for those natural parents who had survived, rebonding has been very difficult in some circumstances. So the way it worked out was this. If their John and I did something good, he would get a hug and a kiss, and I would get a verbal thank you. If we did something naughty, I would get a verbal reprimand, and he would get the hiding of his life. So it was swings and roundabouts. But so they treated us very differently, but I say their commitment to me, that was my home until I married Elizabeth when I was age 30. A long-term commitment which they fulfilled. And I just thank them for that.
It is my great honour to participate in these events commemorating the Holocaust, the genocide of European Roma and Sinti. I first became aware in detail of the genocide when I visited the museum in Heidelberg some 10 years ago. There, through the excellent presentations, I, too late in my life, but finally became aware of this horror, this stain on European history. 500,000 people murdered in an attempt to wipe out an entire people. Never again. It is so important to deliver on never again that we remember. We must never allow the stories to die. And the challenge of remembering is all the greater today as those who survived these horrors themselves pass away. We need new ways to remember, new ways to commemorate, new ways to make sure that our children know what happened, and with that sense of never again. Of course, it's not just about remembering. It is also about recognizing the reality of today, the reality of shocking and unacceptable and frankly rising levels of anti-Gypsyism, of patterns of hatred, discrimination, harassment perpetrated against the members of Roma, Sinti and traveller communities. In other words, we are living in a context in which terrible things can happen again. Now, as a dimension of our pushback, it's vital to work in support of respect for the human rights of every member of the Roma and Sinti communities, wherever they are. I pledge, as recently appointed Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, to do all that I can as one of my top priorities to tackle anti-Gypsyism and to stand up for the human rights of the Roma, Sinti and traveller communities. One last thing. My pledge is to work with Roma, Sinti and traveller communities, not for them, but to work in partnership, supporting you, working with you, so that we together can deliver that better world in which we are all treated equally with respect in our great diversity. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Holocaust Memorial Day Vigil. My name is James Henderson. I'm the Council's Director of Policy and Democratic Engagement. This year's Holocaust Memorial Day is a particularly important one as it marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination camp. As we reflect and remember the genocide committed against the Jewish people by the Nazis and the genocides committed across the world since, we also think, as part of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day theme, about the contributions we can all make to shaping a better future for humanity. We will now start tonight's vigil, so please may I invite the Right Worshipful, the Lord Mayor of Sheffield, Councillor Jane Dunn, onto the stage to deliver some opening remarks. Lord Mayor.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Holocaust Memorial Day Vigil 2025. Before I go any further, I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank you all for joining us here today. Every year on January the 27th, we come together as a city to remember those under Nazi persecution during the Holocaust and the subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur and Bosnia. The theme for Holocaust Memorial Day 2025 is the For a Brighter Future. This Holocaust Memorial Day marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration camp complex, and the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Bosnia, as well as the 80th anniversary of the Roma genocide. 80 years on from the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau, many UK communities are feeling vulnerable, with hostility and suspicion of others rising. We hope that Holocaust Memorial Day 2025 can be an opportunity for people to come together, learn both from and about the past, and take action, as there are many things we can do to create a better future. We can speak up against Holocaust and genocide denial and distortion. We can challenge prejudice. We can encourage others to learn about the Holocaust and more recent genocides. We all have a part to play in creating a better future where people are not suffering prejudice or persecution because of their faith, ethnicity, or any other characteristic. I am humbled that tonight we are joined by Michael Lewis, who I know very well, who tells us about his mother, Heli, who survived Terezin, Auschwitz, Stukenhof, and a death march. Michael's account also talks about what happened to other family members. This dreadful and inhumane period shall never be forgotten. Sheffield will continue to raise awareness around the Holocaust and other genocides, encourage solidarity, act collectively against oppression, and express a wish, a genuine humanity and kindness to all. Sheffield is the first city of sanctuary in the UK, and we should feel incredibly proud for those of us who call this welcoming and vibrant city our home. We are truly committed in supporting those who had no choice but to flee their homes thousands of miles away to create a life they truly deserve here with all of us. 80 years after the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau, we must become the generations who carry forward the legacy of the witnesses, remember those who were murdered, and challenge those that distort or deny the past, or who discriminate and persecute today. Together, as we move into what is another challenging year ahead, let us take the steps together as ordinary but extraordinary people and be the ones that make the contributions that strengthen freedoms around the world as we take actions to make a better future for all. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd now like to introduce Councillor Fran Belbin, Deputy Leader of Sheffield City Council, to provide a reflection on behalf of the Council. Councillor Belbin.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I bring apologies as well from Councillor Tom Hunt, the Leader of the Council, who unfortunately is travelling today and not able to be with us. As the Lord Mayor has said, this year's Holocaust Memorial Day marks 80 years to the day since the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. It was on the 27th of January 1945 that Soviet soldiers finally entered the camp and found the remaining 7,000 mainly Jewish prisoners incarcerated there, and they began to uncover and document the horror and the suffering that had taken place under the Nazi regime. Since then, since 2005, the world has come together on this day every year to remember, to reflect, and to reaffirm our collective commitment to challenge hatred wherever it occurs, and to build, in the words of this year's theme, a brighter future. We also remember the genocide committed against the Roma people by the Nazis during World War II, and the mass murder of other groups of people who the Nazis persecuted, including disabled people, gay people, and people whose political views they didn't agree with, such as trade unionists. Sadly, 1945 did not mark the end of humanity's ability to inflict suffering on people who were perceived as different or alien. We also mark the 30th anniversary of the Bosnian genocide, which remains the largest mass murder in Europe since World War II, and other genocides that have taken place, including in Cambodia and Darfur. The Holocaust was the mass murder of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children by the Nazi regime. Jews across Nazi-occupied Europe in the years prior to the Holocaust experienced increasingly suffocating restrictions to their freedom, where they could travel, who they could associate with, what work they were allowed to do, and where they could live. That painful stripping back of their freedoms, that drumbeat of dehumanization, of othering, culminated in the mass murder of the Holocaust. Like the Lord Mayor, I'm very pleased and humbled that Mike Lewis is here today to speak about the experiences of his family, of his mother, Helen Helly, and his grandmother, Elsa, and her first husband, Paul. And you will hear more about their stories, which resonate down the years. To mark the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau in 2025, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust has launched a special nationwide arts and education project called 80 Candles for 80 Years. Sheffield is proud and privileged to take part in the project and its digital exhibition of 80 bespoke candle holders, which have been designed and created by communities and organisations across the UK, and that highlight the life of an individual or a community who was persecuted by the Nazis. Our Sheffield candle holder was designed following 2 workshops where communities came together, and they made it clear that the Sheffield candle holder should also be telling the story of the unknown people who were murdered, as no one should ever be forgotten. The digital exhibition was launched at the UK Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony in central London earlier this afternoon. Perpetrator regimes erode the freedom of people they are targeting, but they also restrict the freedoms of others around them to prevent challenge. Despite this, there are always those who are prepared to risk their own freedom in order to preserve the freedom of others. Stories of some of those brave and righteous people and many others are featured in a powerful exhibition launched a year ago by Seven Hills Shul, which commemorates how Christians and Muslims risked their lives and freedoms to save Jews from the Nazis. That exhibition is here this evening, and I hope everyone will get the chance to take a look at it. The Council has worked with the Shul, who have given us access to a copy of the exhibition that we can loan out to schools and other organisations in Sheffield and within South Yorkshire. So tonight, as we listen to the speakers, let us all reflect on how people can come together, learn about the Holocaust and more recent genocides, and take the actions that help to create a brighter future for all. The Italian author and Jewish Holocaust survivor Primo Levi wrote, "We cannot understand fascism, but we can and must understand from where it springs, and we must be on our guard, because what happened can happen again. For this reason, it is everyone's duty to reflect on what happened." So tonight, as we come together to remember the victims of the Holocaust and subsequent genocides, let us renew our commitment in remembrance of the victims who faced unimaginable atrocities. 80 years after the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, we must become the generations who carry forward the legacy of the witnesses, who remember those who were murdered and challenge those who would distort or deny the past, or who discriminate and persecute today. We are the ones that commit to protect the vulnerable, to celebrate difference, and to stand up to injustice and hate as we all strive for a better future, regardless of who we are. In closing, I want to express my sincere thanks to all those who have supported and worked in partnership with Sheffield City Council and helped us to organise this event. And finally, let us also reflect that in times of darkness, hope comes from ordinary people taking action to make the world a better place, to protect, uphold, and enhance our freedoms. Hope also comes from educating ourselves about what has happened in the past so that we can learn from it and create a brighter future for all.
Thank you, Councillor Belbin. Our first reading and reflection tonight will be from Professor Jane Ginsburg of the Seven Hills Shul. Professor Ginsburg.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to take part in this vigil. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Fran, for drawing attention to the Righteous Among the Nations exhibition, which was created by my fellow member of the congregation, David Hayes, who is with us in the audience and will be very happy to speak to you about it. So I am the chair of Seven Hills Shul, Sheffield's Reformed Jewish congregation, but as always, I'm speaking tonight for myself. The word Holocaust derives from the Greek holokauston, a translation of the Hebrew word for a burnt sacrifice offered whole to God. And Jews have come to refer to the Nazi Holocaust as the Shoah, or catastrophe. We commemorate Yom HaShoah, the day of the Shoah, on the 27th of Nisan in the Jewish calendar. It falls in April this year, when we remember our 6 million dead. These 6 million represent more than a third of the Jewish population as it was worldwide in 1933. Now, in 1946, the word genocide was coined by Raphael Lemkin, a Polish Jewish lawyer, meaning the deliberate attempt to destroy a people or an ethnic group just because of who they are and not because of anything they've done. The Nazis carried out a genocide not only of Jews, but also, as you've already heard, of non-Jews. And these murders may have amounted to as many as a further 5 million or more. And as we've heard, Soviet prisoners of war, non-Jewish ethnic Poles, Romani and Sinti, Serbs, elderly people and people with disabilities, Jehovah's Witnesses, gay men, bisexual men, and other men accused of homosexuality. As a Jew, I acknowledge and honor their memory. Ever since that first genocide, we have said, never again. And yet genocides have taken place again and again in Bosnia 30 years ago, in Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur, and elsewhere. As a Jew, I acknowledge and honor the memory of those who died, and also those who survived and were or have been scarred, physically or psychological, by genocide. As you've heard, this year's theme is for a better future. We can't create a better future unless we know what happened in the past. We have to understand why it happened and why it keeps on happening. We know that the Nazis established 1,000 concentration camps, starting with Dachau as early as 1933, including the 24 main death camps. Jews were not only murdered in gas chambers with crematoria, but across the whole of Central and Eastern Europe by shooting and burial in mass graves. Why did it happen? Well, one answer relates specifically to the murder of Jews, and that's to do with anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews simply because they are Jews. And that goes back long before the middle of the 19th century in Germany and has its origins in the birth of Christianity. But another explanation lies in the psychology of groups. We've already heard a little bit about this. In-groups typically define themselves by reference to out-groups. We are like this, they are like that. As soon as we start thinking about us and them, we risk othering people who are not in our own in-group. Othering can lead to dehumanization, to victimization, and persecution. And since the Nazis and their predecessors first taught ordinary people to see Jews as vermin, we know where that leads, to the extermination of Jews using rat poison in gas chambers, to the Holocaust. So what can we do to ensure a better future? Well, more than ever, and especially at this time as authoritarianism is increasing across the world and vulnerable, powerless people are increasingly being othered, it's not enough to know and to understand. We also need to empathize with those who are oppressed, rather than identifying with the oppressors. Listening to the stories of survivors and the children of survivors is essential. I, too, am very glad that Michael is here tonight to talk about his mother and grandmother. It's also essential to watch documentaries. If you're at home tonight, please watch the TV program about the wonderful cellist Anita Lasker-Wallfisch. She survived Auschwitz by playing in its orchestra, and she will be 100 in July. We can watch films. A Real Pain and The Brutalist are very different, but they both provide powerful insights into the long-term effects of the Holocaust and genocide more widely. One of the characters in A Real Pain is a survivor of the Rwandan genocide. Above all, we can try to put ourselves in the shoes of people who were murdered. It's no coincidence that some of the most poignant exhibits of the death camps that have been preserved, such as Auschwitz, and Jewish museums, such as the one in Berlin, are the heaps and heaps of shoes and the other possessions of the people who were murdered, their dentures, their spectacles, their gloves, and so on. There, but for the grace of God, it might have been us. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ginsburg. As we've heard, the Nazi regime persecuted not only Jews, but many other peoples whom they believed to be inferior. One of those groups was the Roma, who experienced a genocide perpetrated by the Nazis and their collaborators that claimed the lives of up to 500,000 people during the Second World War. We're now going to show a short film that explains a little bit more about what happened to the Roma people during this time.
It is a great honor and a great sadness to mark the Holocaust Memorial Day for Roma and Sinti in this landmark year. 8 years ago, the last surviving Roma and Sinti in Auschwitz-Birkenau were murdered. This was a despicable episode in a despicable history of persecution, systemic mass murder, and outright genocide perpetrated by the Nazis and their collaborators. Their relentless brutality saw up to 500,000 Roma killed, communities devastated, and age-old culture shattered across Europe. For too long, these atrocities were downplayed, diminished, and denied. Today, we honor the memory of all those murdered and deprived of their humanity. We pay tribute to the survivors and promise never to forget. We commend the courage of Roma and Sinti resistance, and we commit to combating hate. The prejudice that fueled the Nazis' terrible crimes did not end with their downfall. It continued, denying justice and distorting history. And it remains today. The sad reality is that Roma people face rampant discrimination in all areas of life and all parts of the world, not least in Europe. Extremist and xenophobic groups are spreading hate speech, scapegoating marginalized communities, and sowing fear and division. We must stand together to fight bigotry whenever and wherever it appears, to protect and promote the human rights of Roma, and to build a world in which all people live in dignity, peace, and freedom. The United Nations is your unwavering ally in that cause. Thank you.
Pierwsze słowo to było cygojny, szwajny, cygojny. Te dwa słowa. To pamiętam i z tymi słowami ja umrę.
So I would like now to invite Michael Lewis to the stage. As we've heard, Michael is the son of Helen Haley Lewis, a Holocaust survivor, and he will talk now about the experience of his family during the Holocaust.
Good evening. On the 27th of January 1945, our camp was evacuated. We were marched out of the camp in rows of 5, leaving behind those who were not capable of walking. We knew from experience what their fate would be and dared not talk or even think about them. The first day we marched we were in fairly good spirits. We'd each been given a loaf of bread. It was the last bread we would see for many weeks to come. After a few days of wandering on the icy roads, through hostile villages, we began to realize that we were in fact going nowhere. If the SS guards had been rational human beings, they would have run away and saved themselves. But instead, they stayed with us, faithfully obeying their orders to the last, to hate and torment us, and in the end, to kill us. With increasing exhaustion and hunger, we lost our grip on reality. We were forced to march in these conditions for about 2 weeks. We didn't change our clothes. We washed our hands and faces in the snow by the wayside. We were now past caring or hoping. In this state, the guards pushed us into a deserted barn. We were left there to rot. The guards wanted us out of the way, vanished, non-existent, but they would not leave us and dragged us along to our and their own extinction. We were bound together by hate, fear, and degradation. The person who wrote these words was at the time called Helena Hermanova, and on that day, 80 years ago today, it was a Saturday, the 27th of January, she was forced onto what later became known as a death march. She had, at that point, already spent 2.5 years in Nazi concentration camps, including over 2 months in the extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, waiting for the inevitable walk to the gas chambers. However, in June 1944, D-Day intervened, and she was selected and transported as a slave labourer to Stutthof concentration camp near Danzig, today Gdansk, in Poland, to build an airfield for the retreating German Air Force. As the Red Army swept westwards towards Berlin, the SS evacuated her camp. January 27th, 1945 was the start of 7 weeks of further torment, which lasted until the 13th of March, when she was finally freed by Red Army soldiers. She bore the physical and mental scars for the rest of her life. She was one of the few survivors. Of the 1,460 people who had originally been transported from Prague in 1942, fewer than 150 survived. She was one of them. 47 years later, at the age of 75, she described these events in her memoir, A Time to Speak, from which I've just read. Helena Hermanova was my mother, later known as Helen Lewis. You can catch a glimpse of her, this wedding photograph, taken on the 20th of October 1941. She was 25 at the time and is the lady here in the light-coloured coat. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the people in the photograph taken on that wedding day in Prague. The first question we might think about is, why get married after 2.5 years of Nazi occupation? The wedding guests are here, the couple getting married are here, these two, the gentleman next to my mother. Only one of the 10 people in this photograph, my mother, is known to have survived the Holocaust. Look closely. Several are wearing the Jewish star. We cannot see whether all present are. Maybe some were not Jewish and were attending this wedding at enormous personal risk. We just don't know, and neither will we ever know. Now, I can name 5 of the people in this photograph. The remainder are lost for all time, and I would like in a moment to dwell on those people who couldn't leave testimony. But what is it exactly that we're remembering at this 80th anniversary? Are we remembering the infamy of the Holocaust in general receding in time? Are we remembering the unique individuals who were murdered in their millions? Are we remembering that for many other millions, the 27th of January 1945 was far from a liberation and far from the end of their suffering? With the passage of time, individual lives have slipped from view. They merge into a kind of remembered collective horror that was the Holocaust. Now, my mother went on to live a rich and fulfilling life until her death at the age of 93. She's remembered not only in our family, but by the many people whose lives she touched through her work as a choreographer and as a teacher and later as a writer. She's remembered in her adopted home city of Belfast, where there's a blue plaque that honours her work and where this evening she is the subject of a similar ceremony in Belfast, at which my elder son is speaking as the special guest. And her memoir, which she was able to write, A Time to Speak, is her testimony. And this, appropriately, is the blue plaque on an art centre very close to where she lived. This is who I'm talking about at the age of 75. Interesting, perhaps, to reflect that it took her nearly 50 years to commit to paper events that had happened when she was a young woman in her 20s. But I'd like to talk about the 4 other people in the photograph we were looking at a moment ago and who could not leave testimony, and for whom the 27th of January 1945 had no significance at all. The terrible truth about all genocides is that the victims quickly lose their identity and are forgotten as individuals. Without intending to do so, we betray them. So this is the little we know about the 4 others I'd like to talk about. The couple getting married were called Erwin and Malvina Katz. Erwin was my mother's uncle. He and his wife were deported to Terezin, Theresienstadt, just north of Prague, in July 1943, and 2 months later to Auschwitz. They were murdered on the 8th of March 1944. Erwin at the time was 49, Malvina was 8 years older. Now I can tell you a little bit more about the others. The Blue family included distinguished rabbinical scholars. Both families can be traced back to the 17th century and are a reminder of the heritage extinguished by the Holocaust. Else married Hugo Katz, whose family owned a shop in a town called Tautenau, today Trutnov, in northern Bohemia, and had lived there since the late 19th century. Surviving correspondence between Elsa and Hugo, mainly in the form of secret messages concealed beneath postage stamps on postcards, tells us how much they loved each other. Their only child, Helen, my mother, was born on the 22nd of June 1916. And from her account, we know that Elsa was a devoted mother, a talented amateur musician, and apparently an accomplished cook. On the 8th of July 1934, her husband, my grandfather, took his own life. In 1935, the widowed Elsa, aged 42, moved to Prague with her daughter. On the 12th of May 1942, she was deported to Terezin, Theresienstadt. And a week later, as prisoner AU 244, she was deported to Lublin in eastern Poland. And from that moment onwards, all trace is lost. It's believed she was murdered in Sobibor, one of a number of camps established exclusively for the purpose of extermination. And in Sobibor alone, it is estimated that 250,000 Jews were done to death, mostly on arrival. There is no resting place, no grave for Elsa Katz, and she was 48. Paul Hermann was born on the 20th of August 1908 in Brod in Slovenia, and he first met Heli when he and his parents were living in the same block of flats in Prague. Paul, the glove factory manager, and Heli, at the time the student dancer, married on the 18th of June 1938. And Heli refers to that in her memoir. We spent the first and last carefree weeks of our married life on a beautiful romantic island in Yugoslavia. On the 10th of August 1942, prisoner BA 676, Paul Hermann, and his wife, prisoner BA 677, Helena Hermanova, were deported to Theresienstadt, where they were separated. From Heli's memoir, we catch a glimpse of Paul, and she writes, "When we met in the evenings, we tried very hard to present the other with a cheerful facade. Paul was sent to join a squad of road workers. There was only a very short time we could spend together before the curfew. He rarely complained and carried out his heavy labouring duties with a measure of pride which I admired." On the 18th of May 1944, Paul and Heli were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau in transport EB, prisoners 1204 and 1205, arriving there 2 days later. In July, Paul was taken to work as a slave labourer in Schwarzheide, a satellite camp of Sachsenhausen. Schwarzheide you can still find near Dresden. Heli was sent to Stutthof later in July. All contact with them was broken. A card from Paul to a non-Jewish relative in Prague, dated March 1945, indicates that he's still alive. He reassures the relative that he's well and asks for news of his wife, his own mother. He says his father is dead, and he gives his name as Israel Paul Hermann. All male Jews were forced to adopt the additional name of Israel, and the women Sarah. And he gives his prisoner number, 85496. After that he disappears. All that is known is that Paul died or was murdered on a death march, evacuation from Schwarzheide in April 1945. The circumstances and location will never be known. Further details are unknown, and there is no known grave or resting place for Paul Hermann, and he was 36. My purpose in telling you about Elsa and Paul and Malvina and Erwin is to remind you that the vast majority of victims left no testimony. Today, rightly and understandably, we concentrate on what the survivors can tell us. They are a fraction, and the rest remain silent unless we seek to give them some sort of voice. Each victim of the Holocaust, and indeed each victim of all genocides, is and was a real living person, loved and cherished by someone, important and precious in their own right. They are not and were not a statistic. And today's ceremony, whilst rightly recalling the monstrous scale of the Holocaust, also tries, through the medium of the 80 candles dedicated to the memory of 80 specific individuals, to remind us of individual loss. Although our ability to imagine 6 million individual losses exceeds anything that we are capable of. Elsa and Paul stand for just two, then and since. Now there's a brief postscript to this story. In June 2023, 3 memorial brass plaques, in German called Stolpersteine, were unveiled in the pavement outside the block of flats in Prague where Paul and Heli had lived until the day of their deportation in August 1942. These Stolpersteine, or in English, stones to stumble over, are the initiative of a German artist and can be found right across Europe at the last known address of victims of the Holocaust. In Berlin alone, you'll find over 10,000. These acts of remembrance are not gestures towards history. They are and must continue to be part of our living consciousness. They are our duty to the past, but they are also our duty to the future. Thank you so much.
Michael, thank you so much for coming this evening and sharing the story of your family and the experiences and the testimony that they brought. Thank you. We now turn to a more recent genocide, that of the mass murder of 8,000 mainly Muslim men and boys in the city of Srebrenica in Bosnia during that country's civil war. It is 30 years since the supposedly safe area of Srebrenica was attacked by the Bosnian Serb army. Richard Bartlett from the Remembering Srebrenica project will introduce this part of tonight's agenda and will then show a short film. So, Richard, please come up to the stage. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, James. Good evening, Lord Mayor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Jim said, my name is Richard Bartlett, and some of you might know me as an officer at Sheffield City Council, but I've also worked with the charitable initiative Remembering Srebrenica for over 10 years as a member of its regional board for Yorkshire. The organisation works in the UK to commemorate the lives of those men and boys who were murdered in the genocide at Srebrenica in 1995. I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the film we're about to watch. It details the survivor testimony of Riyad Terzic, who was displaced by the Bosnian conflict to Bradford at the age of 17 years old. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is for a better future. Many of the Bosnian refugees who settled in the UK have been able to integrate well and build better futures for themselves. Indeed, a number of those that I've worked with in the past decade or so have been able to return to their homeland to start businesses or restart their lives, building better futures for themselves. In 2020, Remembering Srebrenica, Bradford Council and the University of Bradford commissioned and produced a series of short films. These films describe the journeys of survivors of the conflict who fled the genocide and settled in the Bradford district and in Yorkshire. The films themselves are available to view on the Remembering Srebrenica YouTube channel and the Bradford for Everyone website, and remain as an excellent educational resource to help us learn from and prevent repeating the mistakes of the past. The film we're going to watch describes Riyad's journey to a better future. Thank you.
You know, we were attacked because we were Muslims, because it was a Serb plan to claim this part of the country for themselves. So in that sense, what happened here was not personal. People who targeted me from the above. On the other hand, it was so personal when it came to the people who attacked us, because I recognized many soldiers. And then, of course, neighbors came from behind the hedge.
Our final act of reflection tonight comes from Rabbi Golom of the Sheffield Jewish Orthodox community. Rabbi, thank you for coming tonight. If you'd like to come up to the stage.
Lord Mayor, Reverend Sirs, civic dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Learn for a better future. Remember for a better future. Take action for a better future. So we want a better future, but what action should we take to achieve this? If I was to use a parable, there are two ways of avoiding illness. Number one, when you get ill, you go to the doctor, he prescribes a medication, and you rest. Or, number two, you follow a healthy lifestyle, eat the right foods and do sufficient exercise and avoid things that damage yourself, and then you don't get ill in the first place. For a better future, I believe the key lies in educating people, particularly children, to see the good in everyone, no matter who they are and whether they have succeeded or failed, been law-abiding or committed crime. The bad must be amended and the good must be promoted. The good banishes the bad as naturally as light pushes away darkness. In the year I was born, a man passed away in Ireland. His name was Hugh O'Flaherty, and he was a Catholic priest. He was born in 1898. His family lived on a golf course where Hugh's father worked as a groundskeeper. In 1918, he enrolled in a Jesuit college and prepared to enter the priesthood. After ordination, Hugh was posted to Cape Town, a long way from home. Over the next 15 years, he served the Holy See as a Vatican diplomat in Egypt, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Czechoslovakia. In 1934, O'Flaherty was appointed a papal chamberlain with the title Monsignor. In the early days of World War II, Monsignor toured the prisoner camps in Italy. He was shaken by the human suffering he witnessed, so he organized a group of priests and diplomats to shelter Jews, resistance fighters, escaped prisoners of war, and refugees. And when the Nazis started deporting Roman Jews to concentration camps in 1943, our friend provided many Jews with false Vatican papers stating they were Catholic, and he personally would accompany them through the streets to protect them from the Germans. Although altogether he hid more than 6,400 people wanted by the Nazis in homes, farms, churches, and convents. When the Gestapo found out about Hugh's activities, they painted a thick white line across St. Peter's Square, dividing neutral Vatican from Nazi-controlled Rome. They placed guards there ready to arrest Monsignor if he tried to cross that white line. Amazingly, O'Flaherty adopted multiple disguises, which enabled him to continue helping Jews and other refugees. Enter the scene a Gestapo colonel called Herbert Kappler, who tried multiple times to kidnap Monsignor and even put a price on his head, but he failed to catch him. Hugh continued his rescue operations until Allied forces liberated Rome in June of 1944. Herbert Kappler, the Gestapo colonel who tried to arrest him, was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to life behind bars. And here's the amazing postscript to this story. Hugh, Monsignor, began visiting Kappler in prison repeatedly, eventually leading the Nazi officer to convert to Catholicism. The very person who had put a price on his head, Hugh found the compassion to help him. How did he do it? I don't know. But I suggest, I put it to you, I imagine that he somehow found the goodness, albeit heavily concealed, that lay deep in the heart of this Nazi. After the war, Monsignor Flaherty received many rewards, including Commander CBE and the US Medal of Freedom. He spent his last years living with his sister in Ireland and died there in 1963. In his hometown of Kinlarney, O'Flaherty's friends put up a statue in his honor, featuring his personal motto, "God has no country." So I suggest that will ultimately make the future better. If we start off by bringing children up to always see the good in others, you'll never have a problem in the future. We should all seek to find the small piece of heaven that is in everyone's heart. And I have a little song to illustrate this.
See strangers passing their way, that they're different to me, so I can't let them be. They don't belong, so don't let them stay. But stop and befriend, you'll find in the end they're ordinary people and not unlike you. So greet them and smile and chat for a while. Respect them, be kindly, that's the right thing to do. There's a small piece of heaven in everyone's heart, glorious gift from above. It will sparkle and shine if we each do our part. There's a small piece of heaven in everyone's heart, a glorious gift from above. It will sparkle and shine if we each do our part to reach out and touch it with love, with passions and fears. Laughter or tears, those ordinary people have feelings like me. So next time you meet on a bus, train or street, remember this message, look and you'll see. There's a small piece of heaven in everyone's heart, a glorious gift from above. It will sparkle and shine if we each do our part to reach out and touch it with love. Oh, there's a small piece of heaven in everyone's heart, glorious gift from above. It will sparkle and shine if we each do our part. Out and touch it, to reach out and touch it with love.
Try it, it works.
Rabbi, as always, thank you for coming along tonight and being part of tonight's vigil. And now, to conclude our vigil, I would like to ask Canon Justin Dodd from Sheffield Cathedral to come to the stage to read with us the United Nations Statement of Commitment, which can be found on the back of your programme, and this will be followed by a minute's silence.
So we hear again the words of this statement of commitment from the United Nations. We recognize that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. its unprecedented character and horror, will always hold universal meaning. We believe the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation's collective memory. We honor the survivors still with us and reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice. We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of Nazi persecution and of all genocide. We value the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or rescue victims as a touchstone of the human capacity for good in the face of evil. We recognize that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability, or sexuality make some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils. We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocide. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learnt. We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by holding an annual UK Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination, and racism. We value a free, tolerant, and democratic society. We will now hold a minute's silence. Thank you.
Thank you. That just about concludes this evening's Holocaust Memorial Vigil. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and a special thanks to all of our speakers and contributors to tonight's event. I would also like to say my personal thanks to the team who've organised tonight's event, and in particular to Bashir Khan, who's over at the side, who has, as always, done a wonderful job in making our Holocaust Memorial Day Vigil happen. Thank you, Bashir. On your way out, please do take some time, if you can, to look at the material on display, to light a candle, if you haven't already. And as we finish, we will have some music, which will be provided by singers from two Pentecostal churches in Sheffield, the New Testament Church and the Duke Street Christian Centre. Finally, to thank everyone here tonight for coming. It is really heartwarming to see so many people here tonight, and thank you, and have a safe journey home. Thank you, everyone.
When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunlight hurts my eyes, and something without warning, love, lies heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's all right with me. Just one look at you, and I know what it's gonna be. A lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day. A lovely, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day, lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face, when someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, then I look at you, and the world's all right with me. Just one look at you,